A lot of news came out in the game world this week, and I kinda just want to talk about news like Fairgames being delayed, the director of Marvel Rivals being laid off, and Xbox maybe getting into AI, so let's get into it. In now long-running gaming tradition, another live service game seems to be in trouble. This time it's Fairgames from Sony's Haven Studios.
Oh no! Anyway.
Brought to us by Jeff Grubb over at Giant Bomb, where he says Fairgames, which was announced almost 2 years ago, has been internally delayed into 2026, and I personally doubt it comes out at all. You have to remember this comes after a major downsizing of Sony's big live service push. Sony initially wanted 12 live service games by 2026, and we've gotten, what, Helldivers 2, and that's really it, at least of note. Unless you want to count Concord, but the less said about that game, the better. And I think Sony agrees with me on that one. The live service trend is just come and gone. It's a tough market to break into now because, at least for single player games, you only really had to compete with whatever's coming out around you because, people play games, beat it, and then move on. But for live service games, you are not only competing with what's coming out at the same time as you, but also every other successful game in the genre that came out in the past. And those ones are the ones with the most deeply entrenched communities. Why would you leave Fortnite or Call of Duty or Apex when you got more money invested in those than your own future, and they've worked themselves into your routine? Every night or other night you hop onto Fortnite with your friends. It's hard to break that habit, let alone convincing your friends to also break that habit. Yeah, Marvel Rivals was able to break through, but that was a targeted attack on Overwatch that had made disappointing their fans a tradition by this point. After the failure of Concord and Sony earlier cancelling a Last of Us and Spider-Man live service game, it's clear they're being a lot more careful where they put their money, and if I were them, I'd bank on that Bungie game they got cooking. Bungie is known for their multiplayer games, their audience is the live service audience, and say what you will about Destiny, you can't argue it's stuck around longer than most, so they are the safer bet. Unfortunately, it wouldn't surprise me if we're all reading stories about the cancellation of Fairgames and the shuttering of Haven Studios in a year or two. Speaking of games that might be in development hell, you remember Everwild? It was that game announced by Rare in 2019 and we haven't heard anything about it since then. Well, in an interview with Xbox Era, Phil Spencer said he visited Rare Studios to take a look at the game, saying, quote, "I'll say because I was recently out at Rare, it's nice to see the team with Everwild and the progress that they're making," end quote. So it still exists. Woo! And we still know nothing about it. Less woo. But it's important to remember that the game was rumored to be rebooted internally in 2020 after the exit of its creative director, Simon Woodroffe. And with how long it takes for games to be made, the lengthy silence kind of makes sense. But that was 5 years ago now. The original trailer did look nice, like the game would be more about working with nature, coexisting with it, and had a kind of almost calming feel to it. How much of that remains after its reboot though, who knows? We'll just have to wait and see. In other news, massively successful game lays off its staff.
I am shocked. Shocked. Well, not that shocked.
This time it's Marvel Rivals, but to be fair, it's a little bit more complicated this time. Earlier in the week, NetEase, the owners of Marvel Rivals, laid off 6 people from their US division, leading to a lot of people, understandably, kind of panicking, but it appears this is just part of a larger trend of NetEase CEO William Ding tightening the reins on his company, resulting in, unfortunately, a lot of layoffs. NetEase has also pulled back from a lot of other studios outside of China, like Worlds Untold, which is led by ex-BioWare creative Mark Walters, Oka Studios, who made Visions of Mana, and more over the past year. And what's worse is it sounds like they're far from done, with a story from GameFile saying NetEase plans to divest from a majority of their overseas studios. So why? Why is this happening? Well, it's no secret the industry is still in turmoil after the astronomical expectations set in 2020, because as we all know, when something goes up, it never goes back down. It just keeps going up and up and up forever. That's how the saying goes, right? I don't know, physics was never my strong suit. There's also those pesky tariffs that keep getting threatened that may just make companies want to pull back their gaming divisions in general and sit with the safe bets that they already have right now. If you're just a Marvel Rivals fan, I don't think this is going to change anything for you. This was a small team, and while it's unfortunate those people lost their jobs and I hope they land on their feet, I doubt losing such a small team will affect the game going forward in any noticeable way for players. This could be a bit of a canary in the coal mine though, in that it could be hinting NetEase upping the prices of cosmetics or something, but if that happens, it would be due more to world economics and good old corporate greed than anything else. But at least they're not adding AI. Unlike Microsoft, who's developing an AI project called Muse, a quote, generative AI model of a video game that can generate game visuals, controller actions, or both. Wow, game visuals and controller action? We truly live in unprecedented times. Xbox would go on to say how it could be used for game preservation. Quote, today, countless classic games tied to aging hardware are no longer playable by most people. Thanks to this breakthrough, we are exploring the potential for Muse to take older back catalog games from our studios and optimize them for any device. We believe this could radically change how we preserve and experience classic games in the future and make them accessible to more players, end quote. Man, if we only had some way of emulating games, emulation if you will, you could run it on some kind of emulator, that's it, maybe. Nah, the Council of Emus would never allow that. They've had just too much power ever since they conquered Australia. Okay, but for real, who asked for this? I'm all for preserving games, and I'm not gonna act like an expert on game development, as the closest thing to making a game I've ever come to is Microsoft Paint, but I feel like this won't actually remake a game. No matter how much you feed it, all it'll do is give you an approximation of the game. Like, how do you program the feel of a game into an AI? If you're just feeding it footage, it can only recreate what the AI sees, quote unquote. Anything else, any secret that wasn't in the footage, or little Easter eggs, or smaller details, all the small things that give something a personality will be gone entirely or turned into nondescript mush. And if you do have the game there in a playable state, then I just don't see why you couldn't find a way to port it onto newer systems or remake it. Both of those not only feel more respectful to the original and its creators, but also gives jobs for developers, maybe allows a new team something to cut their teeth on. Just seems like a better way to do things all around. At the end of the day, video games are an art form, and what makes art great is the human experience. People, not AI, coming up with ideas spawned from their own views, beliefs, their personality. No matter what AI will just be a chewed up, spat out version of that. Alright, and finally, the last thing I want to talk about, Pokemon Go developer Niantic may be looking to sell its video game business to a Saudi Arabia-owned company, Scopely Inc., according to Bloomberg. The sale could go for as much as $3.5 billion. That's a whole lot of Poké Dollars, or whatever they use in the Pokemon world. I haven't really paid attention to Pokemon in a while. This was initially a shock to me. Pokemon Go took over the world for a while and maintained that momentum a lot longer than I think anyone would have guessed. But on second thought, they've just never been able to recreate that success. They've had a Pikmin game, a Monster Hunter game, even a Harry Potter game, all in that same style as Pokemon Go, and all of them felt like they kind of just came out and died almost right away. Pokemon Go was truly lightning in a bottle, but even that feels a bit like a fad that's starting to fade. It was a moment that I think all of us will remember, and maybe in like 10 years we'll become nostalgic for it and want to return to it, but for now I think that fad is faded. And that's it, that's my ramble for the week. Thanks for watching, and like and subscribe and all that.